Ours is a very large and complex program. And to run a program like that, you need a lot of data so that you can be flexible. Based on what the data tells you, you change your program accordingly. So it's a bit like building the ship while you sail. And the most important thing with this data, the most vital data, is the one that's generated from the front line, by our frontline workers, and that was the focus of our program.
We looked at the data and found that there were 6 states, 4 big ones and 2 small ones, that accounted for 70% of India's HIV. So we decided that this is the 6 states we'll work in. This is where the fire is. Within these 4 states, who are the high-risk groups? And here what we found that there were targeted subpopulations, for example, like female sex workers, where often the prevalence of HIV was like as high as 20%, 30% and 40%. So you are dealing with a population that is 40 times more likely to have HIV, and the number of clients or partners they have a day could be like 3 a day, which is 1,000 a year.
First, it was essential to create a feeling of ownership of the data collection process for those who needed to use the information gathered. Second, the tools for data collection, integration and analysis needed to be built for populations that were largely non-literate. And third, review mechanisms had to be established to ensure that the data being collected were of true strategic use to Avahan.
The initial challenge was that most of our frontline workers were semi or non-literate. We took this challenge to the community, and they themselves came up with this innovative idea of using pictorial cards. This is the pictorial card which the community helped us to develop. Here they record generally whether it is the first contact or the repeat contact, and also this one, for example, is whether it's a group meeting or a one-to-one meeting. And these are all the kind of different topics that they speak during this contact. This is about the duration they spend in this contact, how much time it took for them. And here they record the number of condoms or lubricants distributed. And this is actually on referrals for clinical checkup or for STI treatment, and the number of clients in the last 1 week, and the behavioral change ladder that's used here.
Avahan carried out formal mapping and size estimation studies related to the most at-risk populations. This helped estimate the all-important denominator, the figure that enables proper resource allocation and also helps evaluate the program's achievements. To estimate the denominator of these often hidden and hard-to-reach populations, Avahan conducted mapping of high-risk venues or hotspots within each territory.
We provided free clinical services to the MOPS. And when we looked at the data, we found that only about 30% of the communities that we actually served were using these services. Even though about 70% of the peer outreach workers were actually in contact with the communities that we were working with. So this didn't make sense to us. And again, data provided us with an answer. And we found that about 85% of the peer outreach workers were not actually talking about the clinical services to the communities, to the MOPS that they were speaking with. And we were able to go back and retool the way they communicated and their messaging, and that resulted ultimately in an increase in the use of services.
Once the program establishes services like drop-in centers and STI clinics, the emphasis shifts to the routine monitoring data collected by peer outreach workers in the field, along with data collected at the program's clinics.
ನನ್ನ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಏನು ಡಾಟ್ಗಳಿದೆ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ನೇರವಾಗಿ ತಲುಪೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಮೇಂಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗದೇ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ನ್ಯೂಡಲ್ ಪೇರ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ತಗೋಬಹುದು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
Peer outreach workers review these records weekly in a meeting with their supervisors. Since peers know the critical characteristics related to sex work for individuals in their networks, they can better customize their outreach plans. By examining the data weekly, they decide on next week's beat, the next steps for specific individuals in their networks.
So we worked in areas which covered a population of about 250 million in India, and that's huge. Variations are huge, diversity is huge in India. This was in over more than 600 towns and cities. So the challenge we had is how do you give our partners who actually execute the freedom to innovate on the ground, to be flexible, and yet manage some key fundamentals. So we came up with this idea of a common minimum program, which set the basic guidelines of what we would do, but still give flexibility.
Avahan developed common minimum indicators to measure the implementation of the program in different stages. The first stage was indicators to measure the number of clinics that were set up, number of staff that were hired. Later on, it involved
measuring number of beneficiaries reached by the program, as well as beneficiaries who accessed HIV and STI services. The last stages of the program included indicators that looked at social entitlements and also community involvement in the program.
जो हमारी डेली डायरी है, जो ट्रैकिंग शीट है, तो उसमें इतनी आसानी से है कि हमें जो उनकी हमारे कम्युनिटी के लोग के है जो इन पर जो जानकारी एक साथ रिकॉर्डिंग कर फिर हमें पता चलता है कि हाई रिस्क में कौन है और लो रिस्क में कौन है. जो हाई रिस्क में है उनके लिए ज़्यादा टाइम देकर काम करना ज़रूरी है.
Data from peer outreach workers and from the clinics are then used together to plan better outreach for the communities. These data sets are aggregated with other operational data at the NGO level, helping monitor local progress. The same method is also applied at the state lead partner and central levels. To ensure data collection quality control, program review systems are in place at every level, helping analyze data better and leading to programmatic changes if needed.
Data really drives programs, and what we wanted to do is to have a solid, rigorous measurement of both the behaviors and the biological markers of high-risk groups, MAPs like sex workers, female sex workers, and that we call the IBBA, the Integrated Biological and Behavioral Assessment.
IBBA is a survey which was conducted in 2 rounds. It covered about 27,000 MAPs in 29 districts and 2,000 long-distance truckers along the national highways. IBBA gives us a series of key data elements like HIV risk behavior, condom use, and presence of STIs and HIV infections. IBBA is a major evaluation activity in its own right. At the same time, it serves as a key input to assess Avahan's eventual contribution to India's epidemic response.
So we found 2 really interesting findings that helped us change our programs drastically due to these surveys. The first was that within 12 months of entering sex work, we found that a lot of women were getting infected, and maybe 80 to 90% of the infections were happening in the first year relative to the first 5 years or even 10 years. So therefore, we focused all our program then on saying that we really have to work with sex workers as soon as they enter the sex trade. And this is intuitive in a way. For example, when you enter the sex trade, you don't understand the importance of condoms, you don't understand that you could get infected so fast. And therefore, we believe these results, and that's how we refocused our program. The second was really about STIs, and STIs is very important because it increases the risk of having HIV if you have an STI. There what we found is that there are 3 STIs we focused on. 2 are gonorrhea and chlamydia, and 1 is syphilis. And because we had been treating gonorrhea and chlamydia with antibiotics, that we found had actually gone down significantly by the time we ran this survey. So we realized we didn't have to do too much more work here. And the real challenge was syphilis. That continued to be very high, and therefore we said most of our effort will go here, and we started introducing point of care tests that it made it easier to both diagnose and treat on the spot.
Introducing this culture of data use was not all that easy. It was not done overnight. There were many issues and problems such as delay in getting the data, errors in data, data entry, and also mismatch between what we want and what is there at the field level. But we focused on data use, and we tried to solve all these problems. So now we have data that is being used for program review and improving the program strategy.